Hey, my friend, welcome back to Scalable Coach for the next lesson, Plan Your Sold Out Launch. Now, in this lesson, we're going to cover a recap of the 3 phases of hybrid launch content, the IAA sequence, the ideal time to launch, choosing your launch start date, choosing your launch target, and pitfalls to avoid when launching. This is a super important lesson, so let's dive in. Now, in each stage of the launch, momentum will increase. So in the first stage, the interest phase, we are getting a few people to raise their hand as interested and announcing the launch of your new program. Here we'll begin to see the first few responses and maybe the first few calls booked, possibly even a sale or 2. Now, in the awareness phase, the second phase of the launch, we are sharing more about what your work enables your clients to experience, i.e., outcomes and results. We're giving them a sense of what it's like to be a client by sharing some aspects of what the program will help them do. Next, we're connecting by sharing more about who you are and the values and the point of view that make working with you unique. Then we are consistently putting this offer in front of them so the opportunity stays top of mind and is seen by more and more people as the launch continues. And in this phase, we're seeing continued interest, more calls, and likely your first few, if not several, sales. In the action and final phase of the launch, we are creating a natural sense of urgency for those that are genuinely interested in enrolling. We're incentivizing those that are almost ready to enroll to move forward and actually do so. We're bringing the launch to a close, and we're seeing more sales and more calls. So, what is the ideal time to actually start your launch? Well, that's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks from now for most of you. Now, the goal is to use the next 2 to 3 weeks to get everything that you need to be ready to launch and sell your hybrid ready, right? Then just get it out there. You don't want to give yourself any more time than absolutely necessary to prepare and then start your launch. However, there are a few good guidelines to follow when it comes to scheduling. Okay, so number 1, we want to avoid major holidays and promotional periods. So ideally, it starts no sooner than 1 week after a major holiday or promotional period, and ideally ends no later than 1 week before a major holiday or promotional period. i.e., we want at least a week's buffer between some major holiday or promotional period. And examples of this can be things like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, 4th of July, New Year's, Christmas, other major holidays, potentially even things like Valentine's. Although these things can be leveraged in certain scenarios, they're not typically ideal for a hybrid launch specifically. Next, you want to avoid your own personal vacations and time off, right? You don't want your launch to be competing with or taking over your frequently well-deserved time off, right? It's good to give yourself a week's buffer on either side, just like with major holidays, so that you have time to comfortably get into your time off and comfortably come out of your time off before this important strategy is executed in your business, okay? Next, we want to avoid waiting for the perfect time for your audience, okay? Time of year rarely positively impacts the launch of a new product. Generally speaking, there is no such thing as a perfect or ideal time of year to launch, just less ideal as in the cases above, okay? And finally, avoid starting or ending on the weekend, i.e. a Friday through Sunday. We found that in most markets, it is best to start and end your launch during the week, most commonly either a Tuesday or a Thursday. This avoids major messages going out over the weekend, and which often is likely downtime for many people, right? So here are those again: avoid major holidays and promotional periods, avoid your own personal vacations and time off, avoid waiting for the perfect time, and avoid starting or ending on the weekend, okay? Now that you know some guidelines, let's pick a launch date. Now, if you're a member of one of our coaching or accelerator programs, we'll recommend a window during the program itself for your launch to begin so that you can leverage our support throughout your launch from start to finish. If you're a self-study masterclass student, you want to pick a date, again, that ideally avoids starting or ending on a weekend, is not immediately near a major holiday, promotional period, or personal vacation or time off, and is about 2 to 3 weeks from today. In either case, go ahead and write a date down and add it to your calendar now, okay? Now that we know when your launch will start, what's a good target or goal for your launch? So when choosing your launch target, a launch target is the number of new clients that you'd like to enroll in your hybrid as a result of this launch. Now, what makes a good launch target? Well, number one, it feels exciting. Two, it feels like a stretch, right? Like it's going to require something of you to make it happen, but it's in the realm of possibility. It's doable, right? It does not feel impossible, and it does not make you feel super stressed, pressured, or in any way sick or upset, okay? See, most of our clients' launch targets fall typically between 5 to 20 new hybrid clients, okay? So that might give you a sense of where it might fall for you. Now, some pitfalls to avoid when launching. Number one is stopping the launch midway and restarting later. Here's the thing. Engagement in a launch is not necessarily a sign of sales potential or lack thereof, okay? And sometimes what we've seen people do is they begin their launch and they're looking for things like likes, or they're looking for things like comments, etc. You know, typical social media engagement measures. And in some cases, those things are doing quite well. In some cases, they're doing less well in terms of the number of them. And really what it comes down to is the client, the person who's launching, has some sort of expectation as to what they think they should be seeing from their launch in terms of engagement. And at the end of the day, engagement has little, if not nothing, to do ultimately with sales potential. And so what happens is sometimes they see that lower engagement and they stop their launch, and what they do is they shut off all the momentum from the launch, they shut off all the opportunity from the launch, and they stop, or in some cases avoid, capturing any of the potential sales that could have come from that launch. And so I want you to avoid this. So when it comes time for you to start your launch, I want you to start your launch, and then I want you to carry it through to completion. Finish the launch. Don't stop midway. Now, again, if you're in one of our coaching or accelerator programs and you're in the middle of your launch and you'd like some help evaluating how it's going, that's a great time to come into a coaching call or to ask in a community, okay? So avoid stopping the launch midway and restarting later. Next, big thing to avoid, skipping or rushing through getting the messaging clear. This is a big no-no, okay? I know sometimes we're like, gosh, I've done messaging work umpteen however many times, or I think I understand my market, or I know I understand my ideal client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's great. And you might have done that for one offer or for many offers that you've sold in the past or are even selling currently. But the thing is that market message offer match applies to every single offer that you release. And this is no less true for your hybrid. So it's really important that whatever work that you've done in the past, you allow to inform your decisions now, but that you do not simply carry forward without regard for specifically what this offer requires, okay? So everything that this offer requires will be covered in a future lesson when it comes to messaging and things like that. We're gonna help you dial this in, we're gonna help you get it clear. My recommendation is just simply take that very seriously, go through it, and complete all the steps that we recommend so that you can get the most out of your message and the most ultimately out of your launch, okay? Next is overcomplicating and or adding to the hybrid launch strategy. Sometimes we've had clients go, but don't I need a webinar? Are you sure I don't need a challenge? Are you sure I don't need a low ticket sale and then this thing and then that thing? And it's like, no, you don't need anything else. I know it sounds crazy. I know you have 1,000,001 people telling you need 101 things, but you really don't. You really, really don't. And adding things into the launch is actually going to potentially sacrifice sales, sacrifice the impact that you can make, and also sacrifice your ability to analyze how well the launch ultimately performed. Because with this hybrid launch, what we're doing is we're getting initial validation, we're getting our first sales. And with that, we're able to see, did our message resonate? Did our offer convert, right? How do we do in selling? What were the things that people were looking for? What were they not looking for, etc.? And we can only understand those things if we don't pollute the launch strategy with a bunch of different assets and things that can each individually impact the potential and the success of the launch, okay? So don't overcomplicate, don't add to this. You don't need a webinar, you don't need a podcast in here, you don't need a new website, you don't need a sales page, you don't need an application page, you don't need a whatever it is, whatever you can think of. If it's not listed in this strategy, in this training, you don't need it, okay? I promise. So give yourself a break, make it easier on yourself. Don't add anything to this. Next, getting stuck in infinite improving instead of getting it out there. In future lessons, we're going to talk about things like messaging. We're going to talk about your launch content. We're going to give you some templates for those things. We're going to give you some prompts for these things. And sometimes folks get into these exercises and they get into creating content and they get into this sort of infinite improving mindset where it's like, oh, well, that could be, 10% better, or I could add this to that, or I could do this with that, or, oh, that sucks, I need to redo this thing, or I need to redo that thing, or that thing's not ready yet, that thing's not 100%. And they get into perfectionism, right? I know we've talked about this before, but progress over perfection, progress over perfection. This stuff really doesn't need to be perfect. And all the steps that we're going to give you are going to get you to the level that it really needs to be, and not any more than that, in order for you to successfully launch and begin enrolling people into your hybrid. So don't take things any further than it really needs to be. Don't worry about continuously improving things. That's something that you can only really do. You can only really perfect something if you've first tested it, if you've seen a market response to it. And the only way to do that is to actually put it out there in front of them, i.e. to launch, right? So we got to get it out there. And finally is feeling very attached to the launch target or overall launch result. Listen, sometimes people come in and they go, Lucas, Jim, I have to get 13 people into my hybrid. It's just my goal. You don't understand. It's my goal. I have to get 13 people into my hybrid or else. And really what it just comes down to is they're super attached to a particular goal, right? They're super attached to, I need 13 people in my hybrid. And I get it. Listen, I am all for ambition. I am all for goal setting. I do all the things at the beginning of the year, and I do all the things every quarter and every month and every week. I do it all, right? I do weekly reviews, monthly reviews, quarterly reviews, planning, projects, strategies, all of this. I do it too. I get it. I love it. And we want to try and detach from some of the goal setting a little bit, right? We created our launch target, and that's awesome. We're going to shoot for that. We're going to work toward it, and we're going to release a little bit from it. This is a new offer, right? With, in some respects, some new or evolved messaging with some new content. So what I want you to do instead is to treat this as a test. Become a marketer for just a moment. I know that maybe you don't identify as a marketer or a salesperson, etc. However, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, it is your job to be someone who improves the business over time. And in order to improve the business over time, you have to be willing to test, to analyze, to iterate, and to improve. And so that first keyword in there is test. And so I want you to treat everything about this as a test. Now, that doesn't mean that the test can't be a success. That doesn't mean that the test can't produce significant results. That doesn't mean the test can't meet, potentially even exceed the goals that you set. But just treat it like a test, and you'll be much less likely to be disappointed by anything. And I can say this from personal experience. I've personally gone down the road of feeling super attached to a particular goal, especially when launching a new offer. In some cases, even exceeding the goal and not even being that thrilled just because I was so attached to a particular goal. I know that sounds weird, but it can happen. So these are some pitfalls to avoid when launching: stopping the launch midway and restarting later, skipping or rushing through the messaging, getting that clear, overcomplicating or adding to the hybrid launch, getting stuck in infinite improving and perfectionism, and feeling very attached to the launch target or goal. Okay, so quick recap. Pick a start date ideally in the next 2 to 3 weeks that avoids weekends, holidays, and personal vacations. Pick a launch target that feels exciting and like a stretch, but not impossible or super stressful, and avoid common pitfalls like skipping launch prep and overcomplicating or adding to the launch strategy. All right, you've got this, and we're here to support. So choose your launch start date and launch target, then move on to the next training, and I will see you there.